Hi everyone, welcome to the end of 2020. It's time for a top 10, isn't it? Let's talk about some of the best games of this year. And hopefully Marty's going to stay this peaceful throughout. He's going, isn't he? Before we get to the list proper, just mention a few games that almost made it, and there's some great games on there, but you can only pick 10. That's the trouble with these top 10s, isn't it? Maybe we should do a part 2 for this year, because there's been tons and tons of great games, and loads that I either haven't got to yet or haven't got yet. I know that, time is money. Some of you might not be interested in that. There should be timestamps all the way through the description and in the timeline. If you don't want to hear any of this, skip straight ahead to it. It's up to you, isn't it? So, some of those games that's just almost made it, and I was tempted to do like a top 20 or something for this, but things like Merv, Empyreal, fantastic train game with magic, kind of made me get rid of Railways of the World. Winter Kingdom, follow-up to Kingdom Builder. Absolutely fantastic. Calico, beautiful puzzle game with cats and you're making quilts for them to sit on. Welcome to New Las Vegas. Fantastic kind of reimagining of Welcome to that makes it even meatier, even more stuff to score in a fantastic roll and write, flip and fill. The Search for Planet X, a fantastic deduction game where we're trying to work out where this secret planet is. And through the help of an app, we reveal information as we go along. I'm getting into full descriptions. Chronicles of Crime 1400 and Detective Season 1 were great follow-ups in those series. Whistle Mountain, The Detective Society, Enchanters Overlords, Prisma Arena, Project L, Trois Dice, Demeter, Project Elite. It's kind of not on here because I'd get the original if you can. It's just my thing. And Hostage Negotiator Korea. And some things in case you want to say, well, why isn't this on here? Well, there are plenty of games. I don't know if you can see Spirit Island, Jagged Earth in the background there, that have come kind of right under the wire, and there've been a couple of things this year. I've probably made a few less videos. I've made a few fewer videos than I would normally like to make. There's been some things, there's been some broken shoulders, there's been some moving houses that have taken some time of the year off, but hey, we'll catch up, won't we? But some of those games that are hopefully still coming up, or I'll get hold of at some point, are Tawantinsuyu, the new David Turczi game by Board and Dice. Cubitos, I talked about this in the anticipated Essen list that's just arrived, of racing game with all these different dice powers. Super Skill Pinball is a roll and write version of Pinball by Jeff Engelstein that I've played a print and play version of. Absolutely fantastic. I think would be in this top 10 if I'd had a final version, but maybe we'll do a follow-up later in the next year. Kanban EV, I can't wait to play. Faiyum, the new Freedom and Freeze. Curious Cargo from Ryan Courtney, designer of Pipeline. Renature, Stygian Society, Cloud Age, Beyond the Sun, Chocolate Factory. Kodama Forest, Warp Drive, Excavation Earth, Tungaru, and Isle of Cats. Maybe they'll be on there when we come back to this. Did the hand thing before I knew what I was going to say. But without any further ado, let's get to the actual list. And now I've said that, let's say one more thing that isn't the list. There are playthroughs for every one of these games on the channel. I'll put them in the description as well next to their entries. But if you would like to hear me talk about them some more, and a load of those games that I just listed, they're in the first little run of games. I've done playthroughs for most of those too, so you can look into them further if you would like. So, number 10 is Forgotten Waters from Plaid Hat Games, the latest in the Crossroads series that started off with Dead of Winter and then went to Gen 7. Didn't really get on with that, but hey, Forgotten Waters is kind of its own thing. It has got this Crossroads system, but it's app-driven now. It uses a web app. A lot of the stuff is voiced. It's a pirate adventure, basically, and it's full of things that I feel like I would normally complain about in games, that a lot of it is just down to dice rolls. It's not to say that we don't have any input in it. There's some worker placement in there. There's a timed aspect to that, so you're kind of forced to make your decisions quickly, so you might slip up a little bit, or you just need to be discussing it as quickly as possible. But the main thing is that it doesn't really take itself seriously as well. It's trying to make you have a laugh, and that's what we have had with it I think we've played about 3 or 4 full stories of it, which are usually 2 sessions each. I think they've all been. It's full of, it can be added to as well. There can be new scenarios added as you go along, and the ones that we have repeated ended up quite differently to the way we originally played them, in that different tiles and things will come out, but also the same numbers that you put into the app, and maybe if you make the same choice, it won't necessarily result in exactly the same thing. And yeah, I just think that it's a great big piracy laugh. Whatever I would usually moan about in games didn't come up for me at all in this, and I think it's a really great melding of all of these different elements to make a beautiful laugh, really, more than anything. Forgotten Waters. Number 9 is Under Falling Skies, designed by Thomas Ulia and published by CGE. This is a solo game, although it can be played with more, cooperatively, just all making the decisions together. This is kind of an Independence Day style. Aliens are coming to destroy the Earth, and it's up to you to save them with dice placement. In this game, the aliens are coming down kind of Space Invader style in this grid, and you need to place dice in these various rooms in the underground bunker to activate them. And some will generate energy, which you need to activate a lot of the other rooms. Some will give you research, which is the key thing you need to win. You go up this research track where the steps are different values, and you can jump up multiple values if you generate enough research in one big go. Some will let you attack the ships, but you have to have the ships on certain explosion spaces and then have certain values of dice to make it work. It's a fantastic puzzle that's massively variable in terms of all of these different cities that have their own special abilities and own different configurations of underground bunkers. There are all of these sky tiles that the aliens are coming down, and all of those can flip over to make it one step more difficult for every one that you do flip over. But I haven't gotten to the key thing about the dice placement. So you're placing them in these rooms, but higher numbers tend to be better. If you put a 6 in the energy room, you'll generate 6 energy rather than just doing 1. If you put a 1 in there, that's a lot better, right? But you putting the 6 in there, that column, all of the aliens in that column will move down 6 spaces closer to Earth, and as soon as they reach Earth, they'll do a damage to it. And depending on which city you're playing, you might not have that much health to play with. And so it's this beautiful balance straight away between how much can you get done and how much can you risk the aliens coming down. Putting the aliens on certain spaces will move them into different columns as well that can sometimes help but often mess you up. Some will make the mothership come down, which it will every round, but you can bring it down an extra 1, which shortens the amount of game that you've got left and makes things harder. All of the alien fighters that are coming down now have one less space to get to you, and but it can be a really key strategy because every time the mothership comes down, there'll be something bad happening. It will make you go back on your research track or make more alien ships come out, something like that. And if it's a really bad thing that's happening, if you skip the mothership forward kind of in the action phase, then that won't happen to you at the end of the round. So it's another kind of reverse psychology thing against the aliens. So as well as this kind of core gameplay, which in that it's still got, I think, 4 cities to mix things up in all these difficulty levels, it's also got a box full of scenario mode where you play through these chapters of story, and you're constantly making choices between cities to play as. And I don't want to really spoil what's in there, but they change the rules up. They give you some special abilities game to game that will build up, but also lock off a load of stuff that you're not going to see in this playthrough. It's not legacy, it's entirely resettable, and full of if you enjoy this game, just in this base box there is a ton of stuff to discover in there. Really, really loved Under Falling Skies. Number 8 is Tekhenu, designed by Daniele Tascini and David Turzi and published by Board and Dice. This is the third in the series that began with Zolkin and then had Teotihuacan, and now Daniele Tascini has teamed up with David Turzi to make Tekhenu, which is a dice drafting game where the key thing is this obelisk, and depending on whether the dice stand in kind of the sun or the shadow of the obelisk, different colours of dice will be available. Some will be pure, some will be corrupt, and depending on your balance between these pure and corrupt dice will determine whether you get kind of punished at the end of the round or whether you get put first in turn order. And it's full of, like the previous 2 in this series, full of different sections of the board that all interlink in a lovely way. Each of them are associated with an Egyptian god, and you can get statues in those sections. So whenever any player activates a particular action, you will get a little taste, you'll get a little bonus for having done that. It's not just about higher numbers or better. They will often have more powerful effects, but there is kind of races for majorities in certain rows and columns of building these workshops. There's certain numbers will get you certain statues in that area. There is a great big temple that we're building where you don't necessarily need the highest number. You want the number that corresponds to the tile that you want to build in there. There's a lot going into your decision of drafting these dice. Not just those colours, not just pure and corruption. It's the numbers as well. And there's plenty of stuff for you to kind of fiddle with these a little bit. You don't have to be stuck with what is out there, and there will be new dice coming out every now and then as well. There are, like in Teotihuacan, several phases of scoring, so you can build up to try and get the most over the course of the game rather than just it all being a mystery at the end. And it's also got a fantastic solo mode, which David Tortzi is kind of known for, especially with Board and Dice, for adding these into other people's games. Now it's in Tekhenu as well. The Bot and Carmoon, I couldn't remember his name. I was trying to think of Tutankhamun Bot. That sounds terrible. It's Bot and Carmoon, where it's quite a simple set of rules to get down. It's this nice pyramid which provides a branching kind of decision tree for the AI that you don't really have to think about much, and obviously gets to bend the rules and stuff as a lot of bot players do, but it's a really nice challenge and full of loads of little tweaks for you to make it a little bit easier or harder to make it a always formidable opponent for you. Really, really fantastic Tekhenu. Number 7 is Kingdom Rush, A Rift in Time, designed by Helena Hope, Jesse Wright, and Senfung Lim, and designed and published by Lucky Duck Games. You already heard it was designed by. So this is based on a fantastically popular mobile app that's a tower defense game, and that's what Kingdom Rush is as well. It translates it into cardboard, and rather than it being a real-time thing where all of these hordes are attacking you and you need to get your towers built as soon as possible and stuff, this is a round-based board game. But it's a tower defense game where these trays with horde cards on them will constantly move towards your castle gates, and you've got all sorts of scenarios with different setups, adding in more rules, adding in more things to trip you up as you go along. But the main core is that these trays of cards will move towards you, and you will do damage from your hero powers. Sometimes you can stand on them. Your hero base is a 2x2 square, so you can stand on these particular enemies, and covering enemies up is the same as doing damage to them, destroying them. But also your attacks and your tower's attacks come in the form of polyomino pieces. And so it's a cooperative polyomino laying game because you are trying to figure out the right configurations of shapes and things to cover up the hordes on these cards. And it's always about weighing up what is the biggest threat, what is going to skip straight to the gate next time. If certain trays are blocked off, they will skip over a load more that can sometimes end up in one just skipping straight to the gate and ruining your entire game. But there are powers, of course, in a lot of these horde cards where if certain ones are still uncovered when it comes to the horde phase, they'll move twice or they'll heal all of the damage off the card. Or particular ones will do extra damage and be immune to physical damage or immune to magic and all that sort of stuff. And then there are the portal cards that are usually, not in every scenario, but usually the thing that you need to destroy to win the scenario, that can only be attacked by towers, and then they destroy the towers once you have used them against the cards. So that'll really set you back, and you'll need to start buying more and leveling them up, because the only way you can level up towers in this game, you can buy them at level 1 or 2, but the only way to level them up into at the start of the game level 3, but then later on in the game you unlock these beefy level 4 towers. The only way to level them up is to trade them to another player, which you can only do if you don't put the tower out. So there's this extra decision tearing you apart that you want these towers out. You want to be destroying as much as you can. You want to be putting as much damage out as you possibly can each round. But if I don't put this out this game this round and I transfer it to you, it becomes an even stronger tower that now you can put down. And based on the setup of the scenario and the player count, we have these particular building sites for your particular player color, which are the only places that you're allowed to build. And so then there's an extra dimension. So where are these trays going to be next time? Who is going to be in the best position to attack these? Because some towers can go diagonally, some can only go straight on, some can fire, a couple of spaces ahead. So there's an extra reason to be trading them between each other, as well as having the added bonus of leveling them up. I've only played, this was a big Kickstarter. I did the Kickstarter preview for it originally. Was that last year? But yeah, it's out in its finished version now. I know from seeing the pictures of the Kickstarter version, there are tons of expansions and 3D towers and things. I've only played the retail version of the game, but even in there, and I think there's 10 scenarios that haven't gotten through all of that yet. But even in the 5 or so that we've played so far, really loving the kind of inventiveness and how it's keeping this core formula that I really enjoy and love anyway, of the cooperative polyominoing, and introducing new things on top of this. Nice little story things that introduce new. I don't want to spoil things too much, but new elements that have really excited me and kept me engaged. And I want to see these expansions and things, and hopefully enough people enjoy it that we can keep on enjoying great big boxes of Kingdom Rush. So yeah, that's number 7, Kingdom Rush: A Rift in Time. Number 6 is High Rise, designed by Gil Hover, mastermind of the Networks and the favourite of ours from a few years ago, and published by Formal Ferret Games, Gil's company. So this is another game where you can see kind of a more recent playthrough, but also you can go back and see my Kickstarter playthrough for it originally, where it was just kind of plain paper with text printed on it and stuff. But yeah, it's ended up as a beautiful final version with all of these standees and things, and then it's had a recent Kickstarter where it's got all of these deluxe plastic 3D pieces and stuff. Anyway, what if you don't know anything about the game? I should tell you something about it. So this is a city building game where the core of the game is this time track, which is a mechanism I love in games where there are all of these action spaces all around the board, divided up into different districts, and on your turn, you can skip ahead as much as you like. You can go to any space that you want to. But whoever is in last place on this time track, it's their turn next. And so if you skip ahead too much, you're giving other players more and more chances to take actions while you've only got the one you really, really wanted. You have to weigh up how much you need that. And there is, it's not just full of individual spaces on there. They're grouped into different action sets, so you can only take one action in each set. But there are tons of things like getting these floors that you need in different color combinations that's different every game, depending on what size of skyscraper you want to try and lay down. You can go to these building sites, basically, that's, again, completely variable based on your game. There are tons and tons of different powers, but based on what's randomly come out your game, you can gain new powers that can be great one-offs. They can be permanent things for the rest of the game. They can be things that activate every round. And through kind of juggling all of these powers and gaining floors and stuff, you want to build them. You want to get them out into these cities. And there are points for having, just things out there. You'll get points for building the skyscrapers. Avoid saying building the buildings. But also for having the tallest tower in each district and the whole board itself. As well as all of that, though, there is this corruption mechanism where a lot of the best things that you can do in the game involve corruption, or you'll often be presented with a choice that is like, well, you can have a floor, but if you take a corruption, you could get another floor. Or you could get this, an ultra plastic floor, which is either a wild card, or if you use it in a blueprint that requires ultra plastic, you get a bonus size to your skyscraper. So that's a nice little extra thing on there. But yeah, there's often temptation to gain corruption. You can get multiples of the same power from these building sites, but if you try and use multiples in one go, you'll gain corruption for doing that. You are always tempted by this, and it's the amount of corruption is something to worry about, because it's not just a kind of linear thing. The higher you go up this corruption scale, you'll start skipping up it. It starts out 1, 2, 3, 4, and then by the end it's like 45, 50, skipping you the big steps for each one corruption you will take. But it's your relative corruption as well. So especially in a 2-player game, for example, if one player is just going crazy with corruption and the other player is keeping it really, really clean, that corrupt player is going to lose a load of points. And it's all about your relative corruption to anyone else that is going to really mess you up. And I loved it. It's just anyway, just describing the time track and just how much is packed into the base game, how many different powers and things are coming out in their myriad combinations. But this kind of the way that the game manages to really tempt you with all of these corrupt actions and abilities all the time, while you're trying to rein yourself in by observing just how much the other players are letting themselves take as well. It works absolutely beautifully, and yeah, another fantastic game from Gloomhaven. High rise. Number 5 is the Castles of Tuscany, designed by Stefan Feld and published by Alia. And this is kind of revisiting a stone cold classic, Castles of Burgundy, one of our favourite games. And this kind of, it's a lighter game than Castles of Burgundy. It's a much faster game than Castles of Burgundy, but it keeps some of the same things that you are building this kingdom, building up sets of these different coloured spaces that you can put particular tiles in, getting a bonus when you place a particular tile down, getting some points when you finish a certain section, racing to finish all of the sections of that colour. But it's very much its own game, despite all of those similarities. And when we started playing this, I was really impressed, not just by getting to see this kind of other side of something we really enjoy, but also just how fast and smooth it played. Especially when we played a 4-player game of it, which when it comes to Castles of Burgundy, as much as I love it, I tend to forget how slow it is when playing it 4 players, because I'm used to playing a lot of things 2-player. Whereas Castles of Tuscany, just constantly surprised by, well, it's my turn again. It just whizzes around. You have a kind of communal market to buy these things from, rather than needing particular dice for things. A lot of your stuff is done with cards and trying to build up sets of particular colours of cards. But there is a smaller display in the middle that everyone is picking from. And so, that cuts your choice down, definitely. And I've seen arguments of whether that can just make the game a little bit more random, but for the speed that this game gives you, and you do have a lot of stuff mitigating that card draw, bonuses that let you draw more cards, workers that can act as any card, for example. But just for how slick and fast this game works, while still presenting you with interesting, meaty little decisions in this lovely little package. I think it just worked absolutely brilliantly, and it's definitely, without question, my Stefan Feld choice of the year. But I really liked how it translated some of those familiar things into a much faster, smoother thing. I say smoother. I imagine this will be fixed in future versions, so if you're watching this from the future, what's it like there? It's probably going to be fixed by now, but the English edition, for some reason, has got some rules issues. If you go on Board Game Geek and check out, there's a great community FAQ now that kind of corrects all these things, because I think the rules were right in the German version and in other languages, but in English, something got lost in translation, quite literally. And but once you've passed that little hurdle, it's absolutely fantastic. Number 4 did make me question, when there's a deluxe edition of something and it does add a little bit of new stuff, but the core gameplay is the same as something that was released years ago. Should it go on a top 10 of this year? And should the space be given to something else that deserves a shout out? But ultimately, I absolutely love it. Number 4 is Rococo Deluxe Edition. Is it fair that it's on there? Maybe not. Is it happening? Yes. Designed by Matthias Kramer, Louis and Stefan Miles, and published by now Eagle Griffin Games. It takes so to start with, Rococo is a fantastic game. I did a video for it when it was in its original version, when the expansion jewelry box came out, and I think pretty much since then it's been out of print. Especially the expansions seem to come and go instantly, so even a lot of people that had that original base game couldn't get hold of that expansion. Deluxe Edition comes with all of that stuff, as well as every promo that came out for the original Rococo, like the fancy dress promos, the festivity dresses that came in the first board game advent calendar, as well as a new expert tailoring mini expansion as well, and a solo mode that was never in the original game. There's an actual official solo mode in there now, which is what my new playthrough uses, if you want to see that. So Rococo, just as its core, it's an absolutely fantastic game where you are presented with a deck of staff. Everyone starts with the same simple deck, although if you're playing with Jewelry Box, you can get some differences in there, but just the core game, there is a fancy, elaborate ball going on, and we are dressmakers that need to get the people fitted up and looking their best for it. So we have different levels of staff. It's a really nice system where you go into the round with 3 cards. You pick from all of your staff. 3 of your cards come in, and they're going to be the ones that you play. There are different levels, though. There are apprentices, journeymen, and master tailors. And so, depending on their experience level, they can't do certain actions. Like, the apprentice can't make dresses because nobody that is going to be at this ball wants to be seen wearing something made by an apprentice. They're posh, you know? And only the master can hire people. You know, the Queen's Favour is an action that you can take. She doesn't want to be seeing no apprentice. She wants to be seeing someone worthy of her time. And yeah, it works beautifully like that. And you are hiring new staff as the game goes on. You don't have to, but you probably will. Hire new cards with new abilities, because a lot of the cards, I think pretty much everything apart from the starting master cards, and maybe the later ones that give you endgame scoring, a lot of the cards have special abilities. So you'll play a card and pick one of the actions on the board, but then it's got a special ability that can be you take this particular extra action, put a decoration down, and get a big discount on it. Make another dress with a discount of this particular type of material. And so from that, we're making these dresses. You can sell them for money to kind of fuel your future dressmaking endeavors. But often you'll be renting them out to people that are going to this ball. And by putting these people in these different halls, you're trying to carve out majorities for points at the end of the game. As well, you can get decorations, which might tip the balance if there are ties in any of those halls, or they can give you more income, or they will give you fireworks, which is also majority for who got the most fireworks. But then you can send particular people up to the top to see these fireworks at the end, and it will, double or triple their points score at the end of the game. Absolutely fantastic game, an all-time great. And then the jewelry box expansion added jewelry, which you can combine with the dresses that you make to give you some more points and some more income every round. But the coolest part for me is this kind of examination thing where your apprentices and then later journeymen can take exams by using them to take particular sets of actions. Once you've done all of these actions and checked them all off, that you can do an examination action where you basically lose that apprentice. You get to use their bonus one last time, but they are gone. And then you can go through this stack of loads of extra cards and pick your very own journeyman to come into your staff deck that is hopefully suited to the stuff that you are going for. And later on, you can do that with journeyman to turn a journeyman into a master. And then if you're doing a load of it, you can just keep cycling through that and keep putting them through examinations and stuff. The new stuff that's added, it's nice having a solo mode. There are a few things I mentioned in my first impressions that I'd like to see a bit more in a solo AI, but it's really great that the option is in there. The expert tailoring, it's a nice new little thing. Say if you've got everything from original Rococo, it's not like kind of, when some of these deluxe editions come out, you're like, well, that's fantastic, because the original version could have done with a bit of work. I wouldn't say that about Rococo, because the original version had absolutely beautiful art from Michael Menzel. This new edition is Ian O'Toole. Eagle Griffin do all of the Vital Lacerda deluxe editions, so Ian O'Toole has done all of the graphic design for those and done an absolutely beautiful job. Same here in Rococo. I think it all suits it beautifully, and Ian O'Toole is fantastic for kind of merging in all of the player aid stuff and all of the kind of board gamey stuff, merging it beautifully in with the art, so it kind of just sits in there seamlessly. And yeah, I think it's an absolutely fantastic production. And for another thing, I wasn't doing top 10s when Rococo came out. I'm doing one now, so 2020 Rococo Deluxe Edition. It's number 4. Number 3 is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, which is a standalone game, but you can combine it with Gloomhaven, you can mix and match characters and things like that. And later Frosthaven. But Jaws of the Lion is a completely standalone thing that you can just get separately, meant as a kind of introduction to Gloomhaven, starting out at least in a much more simple way than Gloomhaven does. The whole game strips out a lot of stuff from Gloomhaven, like the scenario book is a lot shorter, the map and everything like that, but also there's a core of 4 characters. There's no retiring characters and unlocking those secret boxes. There are secrets to find, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the kind of ongoing stuff and secret books and big elaborate stories and things to find in there. It's stripped down into this smaller experience, and it starts out as just to start with. This is the perfect way to start in Gloomhaven. I can't quite remember having the first leg up to it because I was so excited from backing the first Kickstarter, and I had looked through everything there was repeatedly, and I think about a couple of months before it got delivered, the gaming rules videos came out for it, and watched those, getting all pumped for it. So by the time it came to actually learning and playing the game, I'd repeatedly seen all of this stuff. So I can't quite remember the actual basic experience of just getting the box and opening that rulebook, but there's a lot to Gloomhaven. There's a lot to get to grips with at first. But yeah, Jaws of the Lion strips it right down to, there's a sheet in there that's, here's how to unpack the game. Here's what you're going to need to start this off. Don't worry about, we've stripped it down anyway, but don't worry about loads of this stuff. Just get this stuff, and here's scenario 1. And the first 5 scenarios of the game are bit by bit introducing the core elements of the gameplay, to the point where the first scenarios have kind of prescriptive cards in your hand rather than your normal character decks. That you just start with a few that all have tooltips on them, and instead of tiles and things in a scenario book, the scenario book is what we play on, which is, I think plans are still happening to bring that to Gloomhaven and Frosthaven, because that was a kind of revelation that I never had a problem with. There's a lot of setup and stuff in Gloomhaven, but never had a problem with tiles and things. But when this playing on the scenario book came along, it was a revelation. It's fantastic. So the actual rooms and everything all laid out there. There's a supplemental book for bigger scenarios, but it's all right in front of you, telling you where to put all of this stuff. And a lot of the extra rules and things are right there, especially for the early scenarios. There's tooltips on the scenario book as well for when particular things are going to happen. Such a fantastic ramp up into there. But we are, I'd say we're pretty experienced Gloomhaven players. We played a vast majority of the main Gloomhaven box. We've played those few things in the preview for Frosthaven, and have played all the way through Jaws of the Lion now. But even though, what I was trying to say, even though we'd played it a ton before, the fact that this was supposed to be an introduction to new players didn't make it any less enjoyable for us. I really liked as well seeing those first few scenarios, although I suppose if you know how the game works already, it's going to be a bit slow for you, and kind of, okay, maybe you'll want to get to the actual scenarios, but I really liked how it was all being laid out and explained and stuff. I really enjoyed that still. But once you get past those, it's Gloomhaven. It's playing through the actual scenarios and stuff. It's evolved a little more as well from a complaint people had with the original Gloomhaven was a lot of the scenarios were just kill all of the enemies and things like that. There's a lot more going on, as we saw in the preview for Frosthaven as well. But Jaws of the Lion is taking this further as well, and it's a preview. It's a prequel to Gloomhaven as well. So it's really nice having these nods to the base game if you have played that, and these kind of where some of these stories are going later on. It's absolutely fantastic. I'll say that I don't hold any of these things against Jaws of the Lion, because I understand completely why things were stripped out, but some of the things that I absolutely love about Gloomhaven itself, like those kind of long overarching things, like unlocking all of these new characters, it's a bit of a shame, just as the kind of wizened old Gloomhavener that I am, but also I'm not putting it down for any of that. I completely understand that it's supposed to be this smaller, cheaper gateway into the maybe ominous world of Gloomhaven. And having said that, some of the scenarios in there have been the best that we've played across the whole thing. The Hatchet, I'm not spoiling any of the characters because there's only the 4 base characters in the box, but the one I played as, the Hatchet, is one of my favourite characters. Top 3 characters that I have played in Gloomhaven. And some of those are spoilers, so I won't get into what the other ones are in there. But maybe the Hatchet is number 2 even. Absolutely love him. Jaws of the Lion is absolutely fantastic. If you already love Gloomhaven, it's my favourite game. So it was bound to be a winner for me, I think. But if maybe the great big chest of Gloomhaven was a bit too intimidating or a bit too much, as it was, Jaws of the Lion is here now. Maybe that's a better way to, well, it's definitely a better way to get in. Maybe you'll enjoy that. I don't know. This is my list. It's number 3 on there. Jaws of the Lion. Number 2 is Hallertau, designed by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Lookout Games. Uwe Rosenberg, one of my favourite designers, and in this game you are breeding sheep and placing workers and planting crops to try and get points and things. Sounds like a lot of Uwe Rosenberg games, but despite that, it's very different. It feels very different. One of the key things that makes it feel so different is, and I underestimated this to begin with, is the importance of cards in this game. You are presented with, I think it's about 5 cards to begin with, and a points card that you can work towards later on. And these cards kind of nudge you in certain directions. They're not kind of the be-all and end-all of, you must do this thing right now. Delivery came, Marty's gone. So, yes, the cards. You can play cards with some caveats. You can play cards mostly at any time as well. Sometimes it's key to do them during someone else's turn. Some cards relate to what the state of this worker placement board is. When an action is fully occupied, you can play this card. A lot of them relate to things you have rather than you having to spend things. It's have this much rye and this much clay. And it's probably not going to be that combination, but it wants you to have this stuff. So once you have acquired all of it to meet this goal and get this bonus, now you can go in different paths because you have already built up these resources. You can get cards that will give you bonuses every round, and I particularly enjoy building up loads of those, so you end up with all of these bonuses kicking off at the start of every round of the game. The worker placement has a bit of a twist on it, whereas instead of it just being one spot, one worker, no one else can take that action. Most of the workers' placement spots have a space for 1 worker, and then 2, and then 3 on top of each other. So, if you're the first person to do that action, it's 1 worker, and then if you still want to do it, you can take that action, but it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be more workers, and at the beginning of the game, you don't get that many workers, of course. There are ways of you getting most of the crops and things, but the key way that you want to keep getting more is by sowing them, because there's this lovely laying fields fallow. There's a name for it. But you are, at the start of the game, you have your fields in this particular configuration, and every time you plant something in a field, you will get that many of it back. So if your field is in, say, the 4 row, you plant one of your crops in there, you'll get 4 back at the end of this round. It's not like, say, Agricola where it's just 1 coming off per round. You get all 4 coming off in one big go. But then the field slides down to show that it's less effective now because you are continually using all of the goodness from the ground by repeatedly planting things in there. Whereas if you leave a field fallow and there was nothing planted in there this round, then it will go up a step, and one of your fields can go up 1 extra step each round as well. So there's a nice balance between that as well. You don't just want to keep planting things constantly. Sometimes you need to give the earth a break to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to planting stuff. The breeding sheep are the only animal in the game used for a ton of things on a load of cards and stuff. They can provide you with a load of wool and milk and stuff the more sheep that you get, but they also have this expiration date. They only last, I think it's 3 rounds in the future. And so when you get to round 4, say, there are only 6 rounds in the game. So as soon as you get to round 4, it's fine because they will go into your special paddock. That means they're worth a point each at the end of the game. But otherwise, you need to do something with them before they run out and just die of natural causes, and you didn't manage to protect them and get anything from them. Wait a minute, I might be interrupting Hallertau just in the middle of stuff here, but I didn't even get into the workshops and the key thing that you are doing in this game. It's not the be-all and end-all. This is something that most people will get done, and then what you did besides that will be what decides the game. But there are all of these workshops that want particular resources, and some resources want more of one resource than another to be able to pay for there. At the start of the game, each workshop just needs 1 resource of a particular type to move it along. There are rocks preventing you from moving it a ton in one big go, but you can get tools that will move the rocks to allow you to do multiple moves in 1 round. But that is a key kind of balance between the resources. You need a bit of everything, not particularly absolutely everything. But yeah, you can get jewelry that's a wild card that lets you just move a workshop, and then there's a fantastic action that lets you move a workshop back the opposite way that you want in order to get a load more of this jewelry. There, you could just move it exactly back where it was if you wanted to. But as you move every workshop along one space, the community centre will move with it, and in that it will give you more and more workers the more you can manage to move it along. And past a certain point, as soon as you've got 12 workers, it starts rewarding you with points instead, up to a really astronomical amount if you can get it all the way to the end. Back to me. I think that when we first played it, and you can see more of this in my first impressions of it. When I first played it, I was a little bit disappointed because it didn't seem to click. It didn't feel like I got that much done, but I was kind of playing it with kind of Feast for Odin, another fantastic Uwe Rosenberg game. This is like the first big, meaty game. He's in the background messing about, isn't he? From Uwe Rosenberg since Feast for Odin. But yeah, I was kind of playing with that in mind, where I don't really play many cards. You get a lot of cards in Feast for Odin, but I don't usually bother with them particularly. In this game, it is all about the cards, for me at least anyway. Maybe there's great strategies of not really bothering with them much, but yeah, there is a joy to constantly playing these, and often cards reward you with more cards of different types as well, and you can take actions to get more cards. It's all in the playing of these cards, the stacking of bonuses, the later on playing the cards to get rewarded with points instead. It works so beautifully, and despite, from just describing the basics of the game, it could sound like any Uwe Rosenberg game. I don't think that this, actually playing it, I don't think that it particularly feels like any of them. It's definitely stands alone, and it's so fantastic. I urge you to try Hallertau. And here we are at number 1. The best game of 2020 for me was Praga Caput Regni, designed by Vladimir Suchy and published by Delicious Games, coming off the back of Underwater Cities, my favourite game of 2018, and other absolutely fantastic games by Vladimir like Shipyard and Last Will and The Prodigals Club. Fantastic laundry list of designs now. Praga Caput Regni is absolutely fantastic. So we are, thematically, we're building things in Prague for Charles IV, and he wants a wall built. He wants a cathedral built. He wants all of these things doing, and it's down to us to do it. The core of the game revolves around this action crane, this great big wheel with actions on it, and depending on basically how much those actions have been chosen, actions that are chosen a lot will end up costing money to take those actions again. And actions that haven't been chosen in a while will be free, and eventually will rotate along in this wheel until they become worth points for taking those actions instead. So there's a lovely balance of trying to take all of the actions, not just concentrating on repeatedly doing something. There was a good way of trying to egg you on to do all of the actions in Shipyard as well, but it works differently, but beautifully in Praga too. And so the actions, there's an A and a B side to them as well. The actions are always paired in the same way on the A side, but I really like the B sides where it's all kind of mixed up a little bit, and different actions are paired together. But you can upgrade actions so that you take an upgrade tile, pop it on there, and whenever you take that action in the future, you're going to get a bonus for doing it. You can build walls around your action board, essentially, that can reward you with all sorts of things when you build them. But between the upgrades and the walls that are going to potentially go side by side, there are special bonuses that can be get by matching the corners up. There are bonuses that can be got by matching the sides up as well, and maybe with other walls in the future that can reward you with points and resources and windows that are vitally important, and eggs that are a vitally important resource as well. You can build buildings in the city down at the bottom of the board, where there is a bit of an area majority thing going on, where you can get certain buildings will reward you with points for going around these stalls. For every building that's around a stall, you get a point for it when you add one on there. But certain buildings, you put a cube on there, and then when a stall is completely surrounded, the person who has the most cubes gets both bonuses, and everyone else with a cube just gets one of the bonuses. There's a nice little competition around there as well that admittedly is better with more players. There's still a little bit of tightening at, say, 2 players. But yeah, definitely works better with more, I think, there. And you are also trying to advance along this this wall, where each step will reward you with potential bonuses, more bonuses if you have eggs. And then eventually, as you go along to the bridge, you will end up constructing the bridge. You'll end up putting tiles on the bridge that will give you some immediate bonuses, and if you can keep going and still have the eggs for it, then it will give you a big endgame scoring thing. There are also, related to particular walls and cathedrals that you're building, you move along these. The game does come with a 3D bridge and 3D wall and cathedral thing. You will move along it, which makes all of your tokens for that particular color, which you've got for matching corners of either the walls or the buildings, moving along the cathedral, the walls will make those tokens worth points, which they won't be worth anything if you don't move them along. And then you can pay windows to move up levels in these walls or cathedral that will give you more points at the end of the game. Getting to the top of the cathedral will get you more endgame scoring stuff. And as well, there are a ton of spaces on these 3D things. You can just play flat if you want to. You don't have to have these 3D things if you don't want. But there are a load of spaces on there that will move you extra spaces or give you points or different bonuses as you kind of try and maneuver your way along a particular path to get the most for your move in there. There are ways of taking extra actions if you have the gold windows to spend for them that you can get rewarded with for doing certain things. There is a lovely kind of, separate to the mechanics of the game, the actual components. I think there's a couple of nice touches in actually having the components work for you to remind you of things. When you get a particular number of resources, you unlock a bonus. The way that the game reminds you of that is your resource wheel won't turn past a certain point until you've removed the cube that reveals your bonus. And as the action crane moves around, when it makes a full rotation, we move this cube to keep the track of the game. It only rotates so many times in the whole game. There is a little gap in the board itself that a cube falls through and stops the action crane moving anymore until you've moved a cube along. I said this in the first impressions that I don't think it should make you like the game if you didn't, but I think it's a really nifty little way of helping you remember these really important things by just having, you know, a tiny little groove cut in a player board or the main board. But yeah, as for the main game itself, it's about balancing all of this stuff. It's about kind of predicting which actions are going to be available, and when, you know, the timing is everything in this game. If somebody, especially at the end, if somebody takes the action that you needed, and now suddenly it's more expensive and you just don't quite have the money for it, it can be agonizing. And it was a real kind of toss-up between Praga and Hallertau for the number one position, and definitely Hallertau has the kind of, it's a little bit lighter, it's a lot easier to learn, it's a shorter game while still having that kind of meat to it, but there is a kind of level of satisfaction for plans coming together in Praga that's, of course, doesn't always happen. You can't always get what you want, can you? But when you've kind of cracked the code of it and things start unlocking for you, you start to see the matrix of the particular game that you are playing, and you kind of get that endorphin rush of making good decisions. I think that feeling is even more kind of present, even more elevated in Praga, and yeah, for that reason, number one goes to it. I would urge you to watch the playthrough if you haven't already, or try it if you can play a copy from somewhere. There's a solo mode for this as well, solo mode for Hallertau inbuilt that's brilliant. There's a basic solo mode in Praga that is just basically play the game on your own, but there is also a rules for an AI opponent that have been added since that. There should be a playthrough coming for very, very soon. Yes, I think that 2020 has been a terrible year in many ways, but for board games, for some of these fantastic games that have come out, yeah, it's fantastic looking back at these and just wanting to have put more than 10 in there. Do you agree with some of these? Which games have I missed off? Which games haven't I mentioned at all that are the absolute number ones, and it would be a crime to leave off? Just what do you reckon of board game? You know, I know that we couldn't really play physically. There are no conventions and things. Board gaming as a hobby, like a lot of things, wasn't great in many ways. But for the actual games that still came out, I think there's some amazing things, and it's great to look back on in that way. At least you got to have some wins, haven't you? Anyway, that's my list for 2020. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for watching any of these videos. If you've
completely new to me, probably should have said this at the beginning, you can subscribe and stuff. I've done about 415 playthroughs at this point, more coming all the time. If you'd like to help me keep making some, I don't stutter through all of them, then it's patreon.com/slickerdrips. Every little helps, and yeah, it genuinely brings these videos to you. It helps keep them coming. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have as great a Christmas as you possibly can, if you're doing that thing. Otherwise, have a great 25th of December. Thank you very much for watching. There'll be more playthroughs soon, and I hope you'll join me for them too. Bye!